Hi, my name is Ching-Han Hsieh. This is my ME 589 term project presentation. My class session is on sustainable design and entrepreneurship. So the course goal of ME 589 is to really teach students how to evaluate sustainable technology on an environmental, economic, and social perspective. And then later on to empower students with the tools and knowledge to achieve sustainable design. To me, achieving sustainable design, meaning that these design actually needs to be applicable and scalable in the real market. It actually has to be used by customers. And I think that lots of tools and methods that have been used to evaluate different startups is a great way to us as scientists who want to achieve sustainable design products to use it as a metric to really measure how scalable a design is and how its ability to extract actual value from market in comparison with other technology. So what I really want to focus on is using these entrepreneurial methods to give people a way to extract actual market values from their respective technology so that engineers are not just creating gadgets that have the potential to achieving sustainability, but also actually producing a product that is widely used by customers, and by that the whole technology becomes scalable and thus is more impactful. So sustainable design and entrepreneurship is truly a perfect match. Sustainable design brings impact-driven solution. Entrepreneurship makes things scalable. And together, if you have an impactful and a scalable solution, you really have something that has the potential to change the world. You really need both. The goal of this session is to evaluate the scalability of sustainable design of technology system using entrepreneurship tool. Number two is to really investigate how do we take that first step. How do we launch up? What is the first step we take when we want to launch a product? So in this class, we look at different ways to evaluate a design in terms of sustainability, whether from an economic standpoint, from a social standpoint, and from an environmental standpoint. But then after that, when we do our LCA, we know that exactly what the net impact is. We don't really have another tool to see if this solution that generated somewhere that ran through this analysis can really be applied to the real world. And in this session, this goal is to really use these startup tools to evaluate our designs, not necessarily launching the actual business, but measure the scalability of these designs. So that will be the goals of this session. The objectives for this session will be understanding the benefit of mixing these two kind of tools, and also understanding the difference between big picture and small picture triple bottom lines. The small picture triple bottom lines, these two terms actually I invented it just now for this product specifically, and later I will explain what do I mean by the difference of these twos. Also, I wish the students who listen to this session can really understand the business generation process that I purposely integrated into the sustainable design process. So integrate the process of generating a startup and the process of generating a sustainable design, mixing them to see exactly what type of steps we have to take to get to where we want to be. And then lastly, I want everyone to be able to understand the different tools and methods that entrepreneurs have been using for a long time to measure the potential success and help them better understand their business. I think that no matter if you want to start a business or not, these tools will really help engineers and scientists to better understand the design and as well as their relationship with the market. So big picture and small picture triple bottom line. The big picture triple bottom line is just the triple bottom line that has been explained in the class. When we assess sustainability of a design, we need to ask ourselves about whether or not it's environmentally benign, whether or not it's economically viable, whether or not it's socially equitable. So a small picture, which is something that I coined to capture the entrepreneurship aspect of this, really is to measure not in terms of the bigger picture, but in terms of a business-wise, how can we actually capture value from these ideas. In terms of environment, now we're not only looking at if this design is environmentally benign, but can we actually capitalize this benign, like being environmentally safer and more equal? Can we actually make money out of making it more environmentally friendly? The second piece is not just is that economically viable. We can say that something is economically viable by calculating the net cost, and then the supply and demand say that, oh, in terms of market, this makes sense. But what I really want to focus on here is whether or not we can, as a business or as a product, actually extract market value from this design. And this is talking about, can we actually acquire customers? Will people actually want to buy this? Can we actually sell these kind of things? And that is a pretty different meaning than the net gain of economy. And the bottom line is, the last thing is whether or not it matches the social need with a design. And this is kind of a vague term of social need. What I really want to stress is that yes, this economically makes sense. People want to buy this. People should buy this because it economically makes sense. But do people actually want it? Sometimes you can have a product that perfectly makes sense in terms of the money scale, but some reason people don't feel like buying it and people don't need it. As a result, this product won't sell and the design won't scale, and sustainability is not achieved. So these three new triple bottom lines, that is pretty different from the old version, but really wish to use the same idea to capture how can we actually launch a product in terms of capitalizing the environmental friendliness into actual money, capitalizing a design in terms of actually extracting value from the market, and creating something that the customer really want to use in terms of they having a social need for it. So let me give a couple of examples of what I mean by this different type of small triple bottom line example. So number one, from the environmental part. This basically takes the idea that we talked about previous session in terms of in order to really achieve sustainability, we need to merge the marginal private cost with the marginal social cost. And that way, by being environmentally benign, you actually are making real money because now the cost is just one, right? We have a system that controls everything. So I think the carbon market is a great example of this. The right picture here is the total carbon emission level of New York City. If you all turn it into a blue ball and you light it in the city, what it would look like, and that's how much carbon dioxide actually exists in New York City within a year. So what this idea is able to do is to merge the two lines and make the cost that used to be social and now private. Let me give you a couple of examples. 1 metric ton of carbon actually worth about 16 euro, and currently there's places like Europe, Australia, and California just open a carbon market. And this actually gives projects that just takes carbon dioxide away from the atmosphere a meaning to exist, because now they're generating something called a carbon credit that can actually be used to sell money. So this big corporation who pollute the earth needs these carbon credits, but they don't have the time or the technology to invest in the specific technology that will take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Now that they have special stars and projects that are dedicated to generating these credits, and people can just buy from this. So really, this is a great example of how we can actually capitalize the environmentally value that it's been generating by putting up a carbon tax, for example. The next example I want to talk about is actually extracting economic values from your design. And let me be straight here. The sustainable design I mean here in terms of this session is not only limited to things that are designed because they're more eco-friendly or because they're manufactured in a cheaper way. I'm also talking about sustainable design in terms of a system. I think that these tools can be used both for a product and a system. And so here we are talking about system. This startup in Australia called MBD Energy, actually, they're biofeedstock producers. So what they do is they partner with industry polluters, people in agriculture, aquaculture, mining, who have all these nutrient influx going to the river, and they use this process called bioremediation, which is basically wastewater treatment using algae to filter it, open pond. And by doing this, they're able to generate algae as a side product. So what they do is they turn a wastewater, which is an actuality that people simply don't use and actually is bad for the earth, and turn them into something valuable, which is the money, biofeedstock, and then actually extract value from the market because of that. So this is a great example saying that if I just put a wastewater treatment plant, say that a bioremediation process to clean up the earth, make it more environmentally friendly, captures no monetary value, then there's no incentives in doing this. But because of this company's business model of actually selling the biofeedstock component, this makes this act, which is normally just environmentally friendly, having an economic value behind it. And because of that, it is more scalable. So now you're cleaning up the water, turning these wastewater that is generating by these heavily polluted industry and turning them something economically viable. And because of this, the startup is more scalable and this solution is being implemented more widely, and as a result, more sustainability is being achieved because of business like this. So this is an example, MBD energy for extracting economic value. The last piece, and it's probably the most important piece, is the social need. So a lot of times we're going to have a perfect product that will really decrease the environmental burden. We're going to have a perfect product that makes perfect sense in terms of economic value generated. But somehow people just don't use it. For example, solar manufacturing a couple of years ago manufactured these solar panels. And theoretically, people should be able to buy these solar panels, install them, and just really economically makes more sense. They generate electricity, and then environmentally they pollute much less, and people should really buy them, but people don't. Because of that, the manufacturing part of solar panel really didn't take off. But what they've been able to figure out recently is that people don't want to deal with installing solar panel, dealing with the utilities and all that, because they're not utility companies. People care about the environment, but they don't care about the environment not that much in terms of changing their actually behavior to match all these things. So this company, Solar City, was actually figured out a model that they're not even a solar panel manufacturing company. They're just a service company that provides service of installing, customizing, and maintaining these different solar panels on people's roof. So what they figured out is a business model that make it really easy for these customers to purchase a system of solar panels and to generate electricity to satisfy their need to be part of this green revolution, but at the same time requires no effort on their end. So one of the really important components for this small triple bottom line is to understand the actual social need. How do we tailor to what people actually want and to achieve sustainability by designing a product that fits into people's need and not just the fact that is economically, environmentally, socially viable. But at the same time, you make people want to crave for a service like that is an actual need like this. So matching the social need with product and customers. Again, this is a diagram of the triple bottom line. Here you see the socially equitable circle. This is an economically viable circle. This is an environmentally benign circle. In the middle, we have a sustainable design. So in this session, I want to introduce 5 more tools, entrepreneurial tools, that has been widely used for entrepreneurs, and also adding on the tool that we have been using a long time already, the life cycle assessment, as also a tool to evaluate these things. The first 2 tools, one is a minimum viable product. So a product that is as minimum to be able to do some customer discovery. We will explain this in detail later. And also a capability map, a map that will be able to assess a company's skills and assets. Another one is a market value chain, a diagram that will be able to see where you're at in terms of industry. Also a business model, something that can help you categorize what kind of partners you need, what kind of suppliers you need, and how can you create revenue stream based on what you have. And then finally, we have a launch plan. Basically, it's a fancy name on the strategy of me taking a first step in this startup. It doesn't always has to be, you don't need to go to the one that has the most value to begin with. A launch plan is simply a way to get into the market, and then you have a strategy to try to get into the market that has the most value. But you might not start with the market that has the most value. Most people don't. We start with a market value that has a low barriers of entries, and you go in and you try to go towards whatever has the most values. So these are the tools that we'll be talking about today. So first 2 things I want to talk about. The minimum viable product. What it is, or let's abbreviate as MVP, it's the most minimum prototype that allows entrepreneurs to test things out, basically. So you can, say that I'm going to build an interface, a tablet, right? I don't actually need to build an entire prototype of a tablet in order to test out if people want to use this or not. I can by constructing a tablet made out of paperboard to access how people use this tablet, where should I put these buttons, so that you don't actually need to construct the whole thing before you get all the feedback on how your customer actually going to use these things. Then your final product, instead of just guessing how the customer will really use these, you will build a product around the behavior and habit of the customers. So minimum viable product, something that really empowers entrepreneurs to develop a prototype or a product that really center around the user habits of a customer and also a social need of the customers. Another one is a capability map, a diagram that basically identifies a startup's core assets and what they need from everyone too. And this is a very important diagram in terms of, yes, I might have a business model and a revenue stream that actually works in terms of generating value, but I am not the person to do that. And basically what this map is able to tell you, are you the right person to do that? If not, how do I become the right person to do that? So on the left side over here, you have the current assets and capability of yourself, your own company. And this is the vertical axis represents your capability. So the lower end represents that I have a weak capability right here. This is weak capability. And as we go upstream, this is stronger capability. So weak capability meaning that there's a low barrier of entries. Anyone can enter this. For example, if I going to sell water, bottled tap water on the street, this will be a very generic asset that everyone is able to have. So your ability is very weak. In terms of access right here, something very specialized. For example, I have a patent in certain things that only I can do, or search some sort of recipe that only I understand, only I can do things like this. So these are the assets that you have as your own startup that other people don't have. What this axis, the horizontal one represent is the complementary assets you need. What do you need from your suppliers, your partners to make this work? The left is specialized. The thing you need from other people is actually very specialized. You cannot do it without them. For example, if I am a startup that do this wastewater treatment company, and I have to need this specific type of membrane that only this one company has, and I need to buy it from them, that will be a specialized complementary asset that I'll be needing. Generic asset will be something that everybody has. For example, wastewater. Wastewater exists everywhere in polluting plants and coal mining, all these places. If I need wastewater, this complementary asset will be generic, something that everybody has. Essentially what you want is you want to be here at the top right-hand corner. What you don't want to be here is right here. For example, what I have is something actually very generic, everybody can do. What I need is something very specialized. If you're right here, that's a bad situation. Your capabilities can't even capture any value in this case. More oftentimes, things are not this bad. Things are sometimes I hear, which is what I need from people is a very specialized technique, a very specialized pattern, a specialized technology. But what I have also is a very specialized technology. So in terms of this, you really have an unclear value capture. You need to reposition your stuff. So the art of actually getting from here to here is by manipulating the two axes. For example, I have a specialized technology. How do I manipulate this part? And this is where I want to be at. I want to be having a specialized capability. But how do I make the complementary asset that I have very generic so that I can be here? And a way to do that is actually buying the specialized technology that the complementary assets have, so that every single thing I have is very specialized, and every single thing that I need become very generic because I buy in all the specialized technology here. So I can move from this quadrant to this quadrant. Another category is a niche business, which is the thing I need is very generic. The thing I have is also very generic. There's like a low barrier of entries and there's low barrier of entry of need in both cases. In this cases, what you want to do is you want to develop technology and patents that actually make you become more specialized. Because things you need is already generic. I just need myself to have specialized technology. So this really is about building R&D, building technology, and moving from this quadrant to this quadrant in terms of become a strong business that actually capture values. And this is a common, very common space for student startups to be in. For example, most things I need from student startup, if they have a good business model, is very generic. I don't need very specialized technology from my partners to make this work. However, this smart process I came up with is also, the things I require to do this also very generic. So also put students in this quadrant pretty often. High-tech things that are coming out of the lab usually are in this quadrant where things are all specialized. And eventually all we want is becoming right here, having a very generic asset. Sometimes you can actually you can't move directly from here to here. What you can do is move from this point to this point, and then from this point you can mix up a little bit. So what this map is really enable you to do is you kind of have a bird's eye view of where your skills of your startup is at and where you want to be in the future and how do you get there in terms of manipulating these two axes. So this is the second tool we're talking about. The third tool is a very big picture skill. It's called value chain. So what a value chain is, it's a industry sector chains that map out the entire ecosystem of the industry. For example, we're looking at the wastewater value chain. So what you have is a source of water, going over to treatment and that diagnosis and the IT services, and going to utilities and meterings, finally recycling and reuse of these wastewater resources. Notice that when a startup is starting, oftentimes people think that they're in the entire value chain, that I need to do manufacturing, I need to do IP development, the R&D development, but you don't realize that you actually are in a bigger ecosystem than you thought you are. So the goal is not to become a monopoly in this value chain. You can't even do that. Ford don't even do that. Big companies don't do that. What you want to do is you want to figure out an ecosystem. Who are your partners, who are your suppliers, and then your position on your ecosystem. Where do I locate in terms of this value chain? And what is the value chain, or the sector in the value chain that has the most values in terms of the value capture? Like which sector of the industry is making the most money? For example, I'm an R&D firm. I develop technology, but the fact is, in this industry that I'm talking about, for example, solar panels, there's tons of R&D firms that does things that everybody does. It's just with different designs. In that case, the value of that sector wouldn't be in R&D anymore. It will be in something more along a line of, for example, manufacturing. We just don't need R&D. We need actual production that can make things happen. Then maybe manufacturing become a sector that has lots of value. What you want to do if you're an R&D firm is you also want to become a manufacturer. Another instance might be actually manufacturing is also very generic. You have all these plants that's been used for auto industry. Now they are being used, for example, to produce all these solar panels. What you want to become is no longer the manufacturer. What you want to become is actually you want to become things that make these manufacturing sell. You want to become the service, so that now you have manufacturing that has all these solar panel popping out. You want to have a business model or a service model that can sell these solar panels. Solar City that we talked about previous couple of slides is a great example of that. Another example is a wastewater value chain that we talk about with MBD Energy. So right now they're in the recycling and reuse sector of the value chain. What they need to figure out is that the industry sector that has the most revenue stream, the most margin of growth. And a couple of tools to assess these things is something called the EBITDA margin, which is basically revenue minus cost, and the percentage of your revenue minus your profit. How is your profit growing every year? And there's professional online financing website that has these information about the specific EBITDA margin of these IPO companies. So what you want to do is, for example, I'm MBD Energy, I'm a startup, I'm in the recycling and reuse sector. What I want to do is I want to go online and check out other companies that are doing similar things as I am. For example, they're doing a wastewater treatment system, also generates side value, it's just with a different type of technology. I want to be able to figure out these big companies, we call it proxy companies. What basically they're like they're devil twins of your current companies. How are they making money right now? Are they actually capturing value? And the average, for example, let me choose 5 proxy company in this sector and average out their EBITDA margin, the EBITDA growth of this sector, and figure out, hey, potentially, what are the likelihood that my company will actually make some money based on these proxy companies? So value chain is a great tool to, number one, figure out where you are in terms of this value chain, right? Who do I need to become a partner? Who do I need to become a supplier? The second thing is I also, because of the value chain, I start accessing, calculating, evaluating the value of different sector and where the money is actually at. So figure where I'm at. For example, I'm right here, and I figured out that, oh, the actual value is in utility. So my goal is actually to become, how do I leverage metering so that I can go from recycling and reuse in the recycle and reuse sector and actually either merge these people and becoming one huge sector, or partner up with these two people and use their technology, their ability to make myself even stronger. So it's not just a tool to calculate and to analyze how big of your value chain, how big your industry is. It's also a tool to make yourself figure out what position you are in terms of that industry, as well as where do you want to go in the future, and where does it make the most money? That will be where you want to go. So that is a market value chain. The last thing I want to talk about is a business model. It's the same thing as a business plan, which people write to basically is a blueprint for a business. But different thing about business model and business plan is that business model is more fluid. You can move. It's like a puzzle. As you see right here is a diagram of a business model. It's like a puzzle that can move around. Hopefully you have seen the videos that should be watched before this session that explain how this business model will actually work. Let me just go through it very fast. So you have a business model canvas, which is something we're looking at right now. It's something like a puzzle piece. This is basically the blueprint of how your startup should structure in order to make money, right? Right now, what we have, one second, let me pause. My apology, I was taking a drink of water. So this is a business model canvas that basically is a blueprint of how your startup should be in terms of how do I make money? Where is my revenue streams? And it's just a fancy word for how do I make money? Do I make money out of leasing? Do I make money out of selling products? Do I make money out of advertisement? What is my method of making money? After all, a product without customer, a product without a way to make money isn't really a startup or really a product at all. So right here, the gift box represents value proposition. Well, what a value proposition is, it's value being generated because of your product. It can be something where my startup, my technology makes water cleaner. So that is my value proposition. I have the ability to make water cleaner in a specific way. So after you figure out what type of benefit, what type of things your startup generate in terms of value, what you want to figure out is who actually benefit from these values. So right here, the person sitting as your customers. What you want to do is you want to have the value being generated by our product also matches the customers. Sometimes, and a lot of times, early young entrepreneurs make mistake in terms of the value being generated in this sector doesn't match the customer needs. Early on, the solar panels actually make a really big mistake in terms of this. They thought that the value generated in this case, it's cheaper electricity. So the customer should be household that needs electricity. That's actually not the case. The value being generated, yes, it's cheaper electricity, or a greener electricity, but household doesn't care about this. Who will care? Utilities company will care. So the customer shouldn't really be household that needs utility. The customer should be people that generate electricity, right? Right here. What we have here is the value proposition, right? So you have the customer being the utilities, the value proposition being a greener method to produce electricity, a more efficient way to do that. Your household who used to have, you guys think that there are customers who need to have the rooftop installed with solar panel. They actually become one of the supplier. Right here we have the supplier who supply things. For example, I need to sell lemonade. Then the lemon I buy, the people who sell me the lemon will be my supplier. So the household right now, in terms of Solar City, what they do is the household as the suppliers rent out vacant rooftops to utilities company as a place to generate electricity. And this utilities company then will take the electricity being generated and sell it back to other people. So essentially you have people who used to be the customer now become the supplier who is now taking rent money from these utilities company. And you have the customer who used to be one of the supplier or a buyer, the end goal buyer becomes one of the customer that actually wanted this service. So it's very essential to match up the value proposition you think your product generated with a customer that actually in use. And be able to figure these two things out will make process a lot easier. And unable to figure these things out will really make things difficult. So after you figure out your value proposition and who your customer is, there's two things that you need to make this work. One is the actual relationship that you're going to have with the customer to actually make this work. And also another one is channel. For example, I need to sell chairs, and the chairs I sell, the customer is actually all the way in Connecticut. I'm in Michigan. I need trucks to deliver those chairs to Connecticut. In that case, trucks will be my channel to deliver this product to my customers. A channel doesn't have to be physical. It can be something virtual, such as a website, things like that. Whatever method, whatever medium you use to deliver your product to get the value proposition into the hands of the customer will be your channel. It is also very important to realize that there's a difference between a user and a customer. For example, in terms of Google's, the user is all of us. We all use Google and to search engine, all these things, but we're actually not Google's customers. Who are Google's customers? The people who actually pay advertisement in Google's. Those are Google's customers. So realize the customer right here may not be the person actually using your product. The value proposition generating by your product actually may not also be generating by the people who's currently using it, right? They can be simply using it because it's free, other factors like that. Then you want to have later on a revenue stream, something that can actually make you make money. And also you need partners, right? And also the relationship between these two partners, the supplier and the partner, things that hold them together. So what are the partners able to do is, for example, I am a utilities company that, for example, I'm a wastewater treatment company, right? I produce these algae biomass from the wastewater from industry, right? These are my suppliers. Let's actually rent out spaces, rent out these rich nutrient influx of water to me, and I can generate these things into algae. So the polluters become the supplier of rich nutrient influx of water. The buyer becomes a biofeedstock. The people who actually buy these algae become the customers. And the partners in this case will be the waste management company actually take out these algae mass and transporting it to these people. So the difference between a supplier and a customer is that a supplier and a partner is that a supplier simply sell you something that you're going to use as part of your cost to generate your product. What a partner is able to do is you actually don't get charged from their service. You're generating some sort of benefit to them so that they can do these things willingly. So that's another example, a business model. Next thing, let's take a flashback and an overview on a sustainable design process. I know we've been talking about this for a while in other lectures. So in a sustainable design process, what you have is a new product development. Traditionally, you have a new product development as an input, and then goes into selection of eco-friendly material, and you'll need to figure out, okay, how can I reduce these material amounts? Then you need to figure out how you consider the manufacturing and the distribution, as well as the end user phase, the impact of these life cycles. And at the end, you actually design an end of life for your product. And finally, you have an output that actually use these kind of products. What I did here is categorizing based on similar type of activities, the phases that exist in sustainable design process, and use that to construct what I call a startup generation process with startup that has sustainable design products. So we have phase number 1, product development, phase number 2, production design, phase number 3, operation plan. So these are the 3 phases used by a sustainable design process. Number 1 is development of a certain product from an idea. Turns out material choose. Another one is production, the assembly line, distribution, manufacturing about this product. And finally, operational plan, right? After this product's being done, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to do the landfill? So these 3 phases will enable us to take a greater look at the business generations process that I'm about to introduce. So right here, it's a kind of complicated diagram, but when we walk it through, it'll be very, very simple. This is a business generation process for a startup with a sustainable design product. Essentially, the idea is that adding still have these three phases previously defined by Professor Skirlos. And then the environmental sector, so you do these assessment with LCA, basically LCA doing the product development sector, you do LCA in production, so on. So the environmental sector stays constant. We'll be using LCA as our tool to assess whether or not a certain product is environmentally friendly, environmentally benign. What we'll introduce here is a couple of tools to assess the social and then the economic sector of actually producing a product. What we want to do here is, instead of blindly adding other assessment and evaluation tool after LCA, we actually want to chop the LCA evaluation process into these three phases and then integrate different entrepreneurial tools into these processes, so that I'm designing and evaluating a life cycle of a certain solution, at the same time accessing the economic and market viability of this design, so that I don't have to do things where I have a solution, I do life cycle assessment, then I do another evaluation, then I realize that, okay, market cannot use that, and you go back redesign it again. This loopy process doesn't really have any order to it, allows things to flow around. It allows us to really generate something that can be used by the market. At the same time, it's also environmentally more friendly. So again, 3 phases. And in each phase, we look at 3 different categories: environment, social, economic. And right now I'm gonna go through every single phase and to see on a microscopic scale how are these things related. And we're gonna be using things like a minimum viable product, a competitor companies, in terms of proxy companies, a capability map, and as well as a value chain business model, things that we just introduced early on, to integrate into LCA process and to make this, so basically merging sustainable design with a process that generates a startup. And hopefully what we can come up with is a process, it's not just for business development, let me stress this. It's a process to evaluate the scalability of your design, sustainable design. And noted that this process is an evaluation process, it's not a generation process. So this has nothing to do with how I'm going to design this product, right? The design of the product is the input. What I'm going to do is to do an evaluation, do an LCA, do a capability analysis, all these things to assess, okay, yes, the solution is good, we generated it. Yes, it has this environmentally benign. Now, is it actually applicable in terms of putting it into the market? Oops. Okay, so phase number 1. You have the new concept, a new idea of a product as the input going from here. And the first one you want to do is you want to do the environmental assessment with LCA. You want to generate, make sure that whatever, so in this phase, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking materials that are environmentally friendly. But this process cannot just be blindly picking anything that's environmentally friendly. We also have to realize that when we're talking about a small triple bottom line, that the environmental value actually generating by your material and your process is something that can translate into monetary value. So this has to be something very unique, right? This environmental value is not just everything. It's something unique that your product, unlike other designs, created. So number 1 step, using LCA to access if the material selection of your process actually generates something that is has an environmental value proposition, basically. That is something very unique that other people cannot copy. Then you go from here, right here, this arrow right here, to number 2, social. So after we realize that, okay, this is something, yeah, it is very unique in terms of environmental benignness and uniqueness. What we wanted to do is realize that, can we actually extract values from our environmental benign design? Can we, because this thing is environmentally more friendly, does it actually give a comparative advantage to our customers? Does our customer want these things more because of the fact that it's environmentally more friendly? And more beyond of that, sometimes environmental friendly materials have a less quality than the actual material. Will our customers still want us to use this if it's environmentally friendly material? Will they actually like this? So what this sector, social sector, in this case, in the first product development process, is able to do is able to match the customer use habit and the use need from minimal viable product. So what I do here is I will pick a material and a material and the amount of the material to create a minimum viable product, a very, very rough prototype that gives a catch of what it means to use my product that has this very unique capability, the environmental capability. And then test this minimum viable product out through customer discovery, actually going out of the building and talking to the customer to see that, okay, will people actually use this? Does this thing actually create any value for them? So this is the second step. Socially, does it have a need? Will people use this? Economically, what we want to do in this phase is after we realize that, okay, yes, it has a need, it has a valid proposition, people actually want to use this because the fact that it has a environmental edge to it, and the level of the quality of the material is in the range that is accessible, right? It's acceptable, not something that's completely low quality. After that, what we want to figure out is, okay, do we have any competitors in this sector? Do people have a similar technology that use certain things? And believe me, most time people say that, oh no, we have zero competitor. That is very wrong. Unless you're honestly a genius or just completely crazy or create something that completely has no value, you usually will have a competitor of some sort. So the purpose is not to ignore these competitors, say that, oh, I'm going to beat them, there's nothing. No, the purpose is actually learn from these competitors in terms of how they're making their money. What are their business model like? How can I copy them? How can I copy them and make it even better? What are the niche aren't being captured by these competitors? And make sure that you're capturing that niche. So be really straightforward, be brave, face your competitors full force, and understand that, first of all, learn from them. How they're generating value. How can you learn from them? Second of all, what are the things you learn from them in terms of like the negative lesson? What are they not doing that you should be doing? Also figure it out that way. And this will be way easier than constructing something completely new. Once you figure out that, okay, I have a competitor, this is why I'm better than them, and this is why I learn from them, you can then move to the next phase of the production process. Realize that there's double arrows in these processes. It doesn't have to go to one direction the whole time. Sometimes, for example, I might go from socially thing to back to environmental thing. When will this happen? Will I scale from 2 to 1? Say that I have a unique processes in terms of environmental value generated. But I realize that in customer discovery and meet people using my minimal viable product, the generated uniqueness that actually doesn't capture any social values. People actually don't care about this type of generated need. Then you have two options. One is whether or not I say here, so yes, the value generated by the environmental thing is not satisfied by these customers. I change the type of customer, right? I find the type of customer that will actually benefit from the value proposition I propose because of my environmental design. Another method is, okay, I realize that there isn't much value in me completely changing my customer. There's actually no customer that will want to use my product and actually benefit from the value proposition generated by this environment. What I want to do in that case, I want to go back to the environmental LCA process and pick a different materials, right? That will actually capture this type of value that we're talking about. So in that case, we'll be moving from 2 to 1. The next sector is, what if we actually, for example, I'm right here, right? I set up all these two categories, but right here in terms of the economic value, yes, there's a environmental values being generated by the LCA. Yes, through minimum viable product, I realize that people want to use this. There's a social need in it. But what I figured out at the end of the day is that, oh, oops, there's a competitor out there, someone is already doing it, there's no value capture. In that case, there's two options. I either go from 3 to 2 or 3 to 1. So let's talk about 3 to 2 first, the shorter route. What happens in what happens in 3 to 2 is the fact that I need to reposition my value proposition that in a way that is uncaptured by the competitors. For example, I realize that the only reason the competitor can get to me is because it's basically the same product. How can I go back? How can I go back to this evaluation of the MVP, the minimum viable product, to come up with a